For most of us Americans living comfortably in the 21st century, it is difficult to comprehend how painful it was to live in Westchester County over those 7 long, painful years, when the people made their living off the land were trapped in a vicious no man's land between British-held New York City and an area north of the Hudson Highlands loosely controlled by the Patriots. Timothy Hunt, a Westchester native, had an article published in 1853 in the National Magazine recounting his dreadful experiences as a young boy growing up in Eastchester as he approached his 80th birthday. We should not assume that America's triumph in the Revolution would have ever become a reality without the patriotic devotion of families like Timothy Hunt. Soldiering was never an option for most of the population, which mostly consisted of women, children, and older men. Sandwiched between brutal military forces, these innocent bystanders were driven to do whatever it took to survive. Many lower Westchester and Eastchester farmers would not pledge allegiance to either side. They trafficked with anyone who would offer gold or needed goods.
Just after I turned 8, I witnessed the death of a party of Patriot militia. There was considerable fighting at what was called the Ward House. I heard that on that cold, dark night in 1777, one of the most important Patriot leaders, Captain Samuel Crawford, was brutally wounded and eventually died on that attack, along with scores of Patriot militia, many of whom lie strewn in the grass around the Ward House. A year later, I saw a British cavalryman, a person on horseback, approached me and told me if he would cut my head off with his sword if I did not listen to him. We were often visited by contemptible marauders known as skinners, and they were always seeking clothing. These criminals were nothing more than hangers-on to the Continental Army, sometimes claiming to be spies. I witnessed a horrible person named Tom Colbert, a skinner who sold clothes to Americans as he was pursuing a man named Samuel Tucker. I saw him shoot this refugee through the head and watched while he stripped the cloths off his victim. It gets worse. Before I reached my 11th birthday, I was informed that Henry Pinckney, the son of one of the most prestigious families in the town of Eastchester, father was William and his mother's name was Freelove. Henry was visiting his parents' home near the Long Island Sound in southern Eastchester. Unlike many other Eastchester families, the Pinckneys and their 11 children never evacuated the town. It was rumored that Williams would often switch sides to protect his family at the end of the war. He even allowed his 2 daughters to marry, one a British soldier and another a member of the Loyalist militia. But Henry was shot dead right in front of his parents. The Pinckneys survived and prospered after the war. I later heard that Freelove Pinckney never wavered in her support of the revolution, unlike her husband. My most painful memory of the revolution is what happened long after the surrender at Yorktown, when the war was actually over, but peace had not yet returned. The British, many of them evacuating New York City, seized me, these renegade soldiers, when I was driving cows to my house. Binding my hands behind my back, they made a good fire and placed a shovel until the iron was red hot. They threatened to burn me to death if I did not tell them where the money was hidden in my house. Begging and crying, I told them I would tell them if I knew. Then they brought out my stepfather, Thomas Shute, placed a rope around his neck, and hung him for a minute or two. Then they let him down. They applied red-hot shovels to his naked flesh, and they continued hanging and burning over and over again. The next thing they did was to bring out my mother. These animals threatened to torture her like my stepfather if she did not give them the money, which they believed was hidden somewhere in our house. My mother looked them directly in the eye, and without weeping, she said,
"You have murdered my husband and have us in your power. But remember, God Almighty will bring you into judgment for these things."
They finally let us go. Mr. Shute, my kind stepfather, never recovered from the torture he experienced and never enjoyed good health after that.